Good morning, everybody. It's story time. Come on, grab your friends. We'll go to imaginations, and through song and laugh, there's lots of learning, and the fun never ends. It's story time. Good morning and welcome to story time this week, everybody. I'm so happy to see you. So we've started to turn the season from winter time to springtime. And with that turning of the season comes a lot of rain. And rain is the perfect weather for worms. Rain and spring are worm weather. So today we're going to be learning all about worms. This story time is not just for kids, it's for everybody because everybody can benefit from worms. I know they're kind of slimy and kind of weird, but worms are super awesome and they're really great for your dirt and your soil. So today, I'm at my experimentation station. I don't know if you noticed, I'm not in front of a felt board. We're going to be making a worm compost bin. A worm compost bin is exactly how it sounds. So if you compost your vegetables, your eggshells, your coffee grounds already, one really great thing to add to your compost bin is worms, because worms help to break things down way faster than composting, than they would naturally break down themselves. So as they feed a special type of worm called a red wiggler, they swallow great quantities of organic material, they digest it and extract its food value, and expel the residue as worm castings. Worm castings are super rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and many micronutrients, and they're so good for your garden. So if you like to garden, worms are a big asset. They're great friends for you. And they also greatly increase the speed at which your compost breaks down. They do all the work for you. They're awesome. So we're going to be making a worm compost bin today. I'm going to tell you all the things that you need, which are not very many things, and then we'll get to it. The first thing you need to make a worm compost bin is a compost bin. So you can either make your own out of wood. You just need a square of wood. It should be between 8 and 12 inches deep. I have an example here of just a bin that was purchased at the store. You do not want them to be clear though. This, I just made a clear one so that I could use it for a demonstration and you could see through it. It's just better for the video. We're going to use this smaller one here because we're at the library and worm compost bins can kind of be a mess. So we're going to use a small bin for our example today. So make sure yours cannot be seen through. It's opaque or solid color. The next thing that you need is bedding. A great source of bedding is a trash bag. No, just kidding. This here is a whole bunch of shredded paper. See that shredded paper? You can either use shredded paper, you can rip up some old newspapers, and you can even rip up cardboard. So what we want to do with this shredded paper, I'm going to be using paper, is to put it in some water and soak it for a few minutes. Paper and newspaper only need a couple of minutes to soak, but if you're doing cardboard, you're going to want to soak that overnight. So I have already done this. I squished a whole bunch of paper in some water and let it soak. We want to make sure that the ink on the paper is only black. We don't want to use color ink. Then we're going to, after a couple of minutes, take that out and wring it out. This is fun to do at home. going to need this bedding to use at the bottom of our worm bin. Once we've wrung it out a little bit, make sure it's still a little bit wet. Worms like moisture. They don't like things to be soaking wet, but they do like to have access to water. So I have a bunch of paper here. I'm going to do a little bit more, wring out a little bit more for my worm bin. Put that in there. All right. So we have a layer here of shredded paper. I'll put the rest to the side. After we have the shredded paper, we're also going to need organic material. So, my brother-in-law, Malcolm Makepeace, helped me out this morning and got me a whole bunch of really, really great organic material. So the reason that worms need this is because worms don't have any teeth. So they need something to help them chew. Organic material, or dirt, that has some leaves in it. This has a whole bunch of leaves in it. I don't know if you can see super well. It has a whole bunch of leaves in it. It is really, really great for worms. We're going to go ahead and put a bunch on the top here. Bunch of dirt mixed in with a whole bunch of leaves to help them chew. Other things that you can use to help your worms chew are sand. Eggshells are great to help your worms chew. And another great thing that I brought a little bit of with me today is sawdust. Sawdust is really great for worms. We'll put a little bit in there just for good measure. This is the best worm buffet that we can make. Yum, 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 they will say. And you'll say, I'm dirty. But getting dirty is part of the fun. So, something that we should remember is that when we're making these, we should not use fresh compost from like manure. And we also should not use our own garden soil because these things can break down and make it hotter for the worms. And worms don't really like that much heat. So just keep that in mind. The next thing, of course, we need, what are we missing in our worm compost bin? We're missing worms. So we need worms. So we need to know what kind of worms we use for our worm compost bin. And the best kind of worm to use is called the red wiggler. Red wigglers look like this. They're the typical worm that you find underneath rocks or logs out in the woods. Or you can purchase some. There are some local spaces that you can purchase a bunch of worms. You'll need to start with a couple of hundred at least. Worms will double their population, double the amount of worms in every 90 days. So if you start with a couple hundred, in a couple months you'll have several hundred. Just keep that in mind. We don't want to be using any night crawlers. Night crawlers are those big, thick worms that you find scooching around at night. They're really big, juicy ones. Those just eat dirt. We don't want them to eat the dirt. We want our worms to break down our compost. So we won't be using any of those. Just the red wigglers. The red wigglers that were in the compost from Malcolm are all teeny tiny babies still. And they're at the bottom of this jar. They're teensy weensy, so that's why I showed you the picture. But we do have a couple of worms here that I can show you. Little babies, see those little baby worms? And when we place our worms in our compost, we're going to dig about halfway down for them and then put them in. Boop, boop. you'll have bunches and bunches of them. And then we'll cover them up and make them nice and cozy. Make their little bed for them. Places that we can get worms, there is the Bait Barn on Route 245. And there are also a couple of local places that sell tons and tons of worms. There is Vermigreen, which is a worm farm in Palmyra, and there's also Worm Power in Avon that sell tons and tons of worms. And some of them sell worms with the organic material as well, so you don't even have to get your own, which is cool and easy. If you can't find them at those two places, you can also find worms online. And then we're going to let our worms get nice and cozy for a whole week. Let them kind of get comfortable in their space. And after that, we're going to add our compost from home. Things that we can and should compost include vegetable peels, little ends and pieces of vegetables, fruits. I got potato peels in here. I have some orange rinds. I have some bits of cauliflower. These are all great for worms. You put that right on top of the compost bucket. I'm going to not do that with this, but you can do that at home with this. And then we're going to put our lid right on, and we're going to let it sit. We won't want to put our worms in a space where it gets colder than 40 degrees or warmer than 75 degrees. If it gets colder than 40 degrees, our worms freeze. And if it gets warmer than 75 degrees, our worms cook. So if you're going to do a worm bin all throughout the year, you might want to put them in your basement or in the summer in a nice shady space, because nobody likes cooked worms. Yuck. So some more things that we're going to avoid in our compost. We don't want to put any animal bones or animal fat in there. We don't want to put any dairy in there, because those things kind of smell bad when they start to break down, and that'll attract flies and bugs and all kinds of mice and rats and stuff, and we don't want those near our compost or in our basement, right guys? So just a couple of things to remember. Worms prefer temperatures between 55 and 75, but they can survive under 40 or down to 40. Your worms will let you know what kinds of foods they do and do not like to eat by not eating them. And just for a nice little math equation today, to calculate or to find out how many worms you need for your family, you think about how many pounds of compost you make per week, and then you divide that by 7, because there are 7 days in a week, and 2,000 worms can digest 1 pound of compost a day. So if you only have a half pound of compost going out a day, then you only need 1,000 worms. It's an easy equation. But yes, friends, also, yes, remember that this container should be solid. It's only a transparent or see-through container because I'm showing you how to do it, and I wanted you to be able to see. If you have any more questions, you are totally welcome to come down to the library and I can help you out with any of your worm needs. Alrighty, thanks so much for coming and making a worm bin with me. The next thing that we're going to do is read a book, because that's what story time really is. So today's book, wherever I put it in this. Today's book, I already showed you, is Worm Weather. Let me scooch a little bit closer for you. Worm Weather by Jean Taft. This is a Penguin Young Readers book. Drip, drop, skip, and hop, splish, splash, sidewalk dash. All of these words rhyme. Worm, worm, wiggle, squirm, worm weather. Look at all of these worms in the ground. And it's raining, so the worms come up out of the ground so that they don't drown. Because if it's raining, all of their holes fill with water and they can't breathe. So they come out and they're like, fresh air. Coat, hat, rain goes splat, splat, splat. Can you find another thing on this page that rhymes with hat and splat? What about cat? Rhyming words. Boots, jump. Old tree stump. Worms love tree stumps. Big stump. Puddle swamp. One of my favorite things to do in the rain is to jump in puddles. Make sure you're wearing your boots though. Mud, stop! Belly flop. Almost. My grown-up caught me. Otherwise I would have flopped in the mud, which is lots of fun. Dark cloud. Crash, boom, thunder, very loud. Bright flash. What makes a bright flash in the sky when it's raining out? Lightning. Bright flash, thunder, crash. Quick race, pizza place. Pizza, pizza, time for lunch. Drip dry, pizza pie. Yum, yum, yum. Sun pops, drizzle stops. Birds fly, rainbow sky. Remember we learned about rainbows a couple weeks ago. Run, sing, playground swing. We can play outside now. It's not raining. Worm, worm, wiggle, squirm. It's worm weather. Some of the best weather. All right, so that's it for our storybooks today. And then I have one more thing to teach you. So we get to learn how to say worm in sign language today. It's a pretty fun one. So we put out one hand like this, like it's a little wall, or like it's the ground. I have a dirty hand from the soil. And then we put out one finger here. We pretend that this finger's a worm crawling through the soil. Crawling through the soil. Worm. Worm. All right, friends. Thank you so much for visiting today, and thank you so much for learning all about worm bins. I hope you learned a whole bunch. I learned a whole bunch this week when I was researching how to make worm bins. And I hope that this encourages you to make worm bins at home to make your gardens super, super healthy. Thank you so much for coming in today, and I hope to see you next week. Have a good one, guys. Next week is Earth Day, so we're going to be learning all about Earth Day things. I'm very excited to tell you all about it. See you later. Have a great weekend. It's supposed to stop raining a little bit. See you next week.